The wages of sin is death. This rings true very prominently for the Sith Order. It seems that death is a prevalent thing among the Order that strives for eternal life. The two main ways the Sith seem to die is either through glorious combat or being backstabbed by one of their followers or underlings. The latter of these is a constant throughout the entire history of the Order, even before the Rule of Two. And because of this, we don't often see very many Sith that actually live to see their twilight years. Where old Jedi Masters make up a good majority of the upper ranks of their order, Sith hardly ever get past being middle-aged before they are slain in some way or another. So today, we wanted to explore why this is, as Jedi seem to become more powerful in their old age, but Sith seem to almost get picked off more easily when they get old. Now the answer is pretty obvious when it comes to the Rule of Two era, as the killing of the Master is the very cornerstone of this philosophy and its foundation to the continuation of the Sith in that era. The only two Sith that seem to enter their elder years in this era would be Plagueis and then Sidious. In all other recorded Sith in history, we may only know of 3 or 4 prominent Sith Lords that actually died of old age. So, come with us today, curious acolytes of the galaxy, as we read the hieroglyphs and explore why Sith never seem to reach this old age, despite their efforts to seek eternal life. For this video, we are going to exclude the obvious reasons for most, which is being destroyed by a Jedi or the deaths of the Rule of Two era Sith, because we already know the answer to their deaths. To begin though, let's analyze the circumstances of a handful of Sith that did manage to die of natural causes rather than battle or betrayal. These Sith are Marka Ragnos, Darth Endedu, and Darth Vectivus. There were a few others such as Darth Millennial, but he died after leaving the Sith and setting up his own cult, so we won't be counting him. Only Sith in the very mindset of the Empire. Darth Endedu died from his own paranoia, having locked himself away with all of his knowledge, and he didn't perform any more essence transfer techniques to continue his long, immortal life. There, in his library vault, surrounded by all of his tombs, scrolls, holocrons, and spellbooks, he died, most likely of either starvation or old age. This is a special case scenario, as his followers actually did turn on him. They did turn on him because he was hoarding his most powerful secrets away from them, so they did conspire to ultimately kill him. He, though, faked his death and went away to the deep core world of Prakith, where he reigned for a couple more thousand years before his fear of his underlings somehow finding him and locating him drove him to lock himself away and finally die. Darth Vectivus, the Sith famous for doing no evil, reportedly died surrounded by his closest friends and family, almost the way a Jedi would want to. I personally find Vectivus's death to be one of the most curious of the lots, as by the fact that he died of old age specifically and no one betrayed him. Having lived a long and fulfilling life, this meant that his apprentice did not fulfill his end of the bargain for the Rule of Two era. Make no mistake, Vectivus was a Rule of Two Sith, and yet his apprentice never finished the job. I can't help but wonder why. Perhaps the friends and family of Vectivus never let him, or I have a theory that Vectivus's apprentice may have been Darth Gravid, the one who tried to mix Jedi and Sith ideologies, but that's for another time. And finally, Marka Ragnos, who might be the most interesting of these lot. Marka Ragnos actually died of natural causes while he was still reigning as the Sith Emperor. His death came along with its own funeral procession, and the entire Sith Empire mourned this one Sith Lord's death. This is a stark contrast from most former Sith Emperors, and all of those to come afterwards. Marka Ragnos had won the position of Sith Empire sometime after the deaths of Ajunta Pal and the first Dark Jedi. Ragnos was responsible for ushering in the Golden Age of the Sith Empire, where Korriban and Ziost were the center of the Empire that spanned almost 200 systems. Interestingly, Marka Ragnos never went to war with the Republic or the Jedi at all. Instead, his life was dedicated to destroying his Sith rivals and bringing together the Sith Empire under one iron rule, the first to do so since King Adis, the Sith Ari himself. Marka Ragnos was the direct descendant of the first Dark Jedi from several thousand years before, and his reign lasted almost a century. During this time, the Sith Empire grew rich and fat, having access to many treasures, as well as an expendable amount of gold and precious jewels. This was the Golden Age of the Sith, where they basically lived alongside the Republic in what some may call peace, if this is even possible for a Sith, with neither system of government really knowing or going to war with the other. Marka Ragnos ruled with an iron fist, but was a strong, capable, and a pretty fair leader. Because of this, he was worshipped and beloved by all Sith, including his successors Ludo Kresh and Naga Sadow, who fought each other on how best to continue in growing the maintaining golden age of the Sith Empire that Ragnos had constructed. And as far as we know, Marka Ragnos may be the only Sith and leader of the Sith Empire in history to die of old age and maintain loyalty among his followers until the very bitter end. So, now let's answer the question, why is this the case? What is it that is making these Sith Lords' followers rise up against them so vehemently? This is the real question. Because many Sith Lords grow to immense power, but are then overtaken by their hundreds or thousands of followers rising up to challenge them. As Darth Bane pointed out, this eventually made the Sith weak, as the lineage was following the cycle of being continuously watered down by lesser beings overtaking the powerful by sheer numbers alone. This was what inspired Bane to reverse this process. I think the spirit of the backstabbing in the Sith Order is inspired by one Sith's jealousy of another. Perhaps they view the current Lord as being too selfish, too cruel, or perhaps even too weak. The Sith are a practical group of people. Very rarely do they ever hold reverence for anything that has exceeded its own expiration date. When their ruler becomes old and useless in their eyes, he has become weak and is no longer fit to be the ruler. It is more or less an unspoken rule of the Force that one's physicality does not accurately represent their power within the Force though, as one who is weak, disabled, or elderly in the physical sense may hold incredible power within the realm of the unseen. This was true for Darth Sidious, who by the time of Return of the Jedi was a little over 80 years old and walked with a cane. Now he could obviously just use the Force to invigorate his limbs. However, he reserved his power for doing rituals, alchemy, and of course, torture when he desired. However, there is one aspect of the Sith that I do not believe is spoken about very often. Where is the effect of the dark side has on a user over a prolonged period of time? Mace Windu put it like this: the dark side was a fire that burned brightly but quickly burned out. Repeatedly, we see the dark side presented as like steroids. It gives you an insane boost of power but at the cost of one's physicality, meaning that essentially, the longer you live, the weaker you will become over time as your physical form deteriorates under the pressure of all that dark side power you hold within you. There is so much dark energy being contained in the living body that the body literally begins to rot away. We can see the small hint of this happening when Sith get their signature yellow eyes. Soon their skin will turn pale, but these are only the precursor signs of what's to come and dark side degradation. Those who delve too deeply in the dark side will become disfigured and deformed. It seems as though they begin to almost age rapidly, appearing much older than they actually are, which of course advances their material decomposition. I believe that once a Darksider goes past their prime, they are in some sort of trouble as their reflexes and senses begin to dull. Many Sith circumvent this by using rituals or finding new powers. Darth and Dedu used essence transfer, Plagueis uses manipulation of the midichlorians to stay sharp, and Sidious had infinite access to all knowledge of the former Sith to keep his strength intact. Darth Sidious and Sith of his era seemed to treat darkside degradation as a sort of fact of life, mostly because they had always had it around them. However, it seems to me that the one Sith emperors of old reached a certain age and the darkside degradation set in. Their followers could smell blood in the water and began to turn on them. The light side, by contrast, sustains life and brings it together. This is why many Jedi Masters are able to stay alive far longer than what would be the average lifespan of their species. It isn't always because of some ritualistic technique, but rather having the life-giving energies flowing through them on a constant basis that keeps them youthful and alive. Luke Skywalker lived well past 100 years in his lifetime and saw several generations of his family. But my friends, what do you think of this? Do you agree with our theory as to why many ancient Sith and Sith in general never reached their elder years? I know there are quite a few exceptions here, but the vast majority in history have fallen under this exact problem. But let us know your thoughts down below. And as always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.